that my progenitors covered themselves so much with glory in gaining and retaining their freedom and ensuring the freedom of posterity fills me with a sense of, and should I say, unashamedly, it fills me with a sense of importance far beyond the limits of anything that I myself could have done. And then, when I think of the glorious heritage that is ours, I personally feel very, very happy to be a Maroon.
Jamaica, or Jamaica as it was known to the Arawak Indians. They were the first Aboriginal inhabitants on their Isle of Springs, and by all accounts lived at peace among themselves until the arrival of the Spanish fleet in 1494. The Spanish came in search of gold. They found no treasures, but instead a cheap source of labor, and the Arawaks were quickly driven into submission to work the fields and mines. The Indians fell to forced labor and were virtually exterminated. If Spain wished to hold Jamaica, she needed new slaves. Her eyes turned across the Atlantic Ocean and settled on West Africa. The first slave ships, packed with their black cargo, anchored in Jamaica in 1517, and in the following years, hundreds more sailed off from the Gold Coast, with Africans bound together in darkness and disease. Those who survived their voyage held up to their new captivity and quickly supplanted the few remaining Arawaks. However, not every ship returned to Jamaica, nor could every plantation control its enslaved. Some Africans chose open rebellion. Organized insurrections increased with time, only to be crushed again and again by the Europeans. In 1655, Jamaica was invaded by the British fleet. In the midst of the confusion, large numbers of Spanish slaves took their chances and fled into the dense interior, where they banded together for protection. Within a few years, Spain formally relinquished control of the island, and Jamaica began a new and dark chapter under English rule. Lost to the isolation of the thick and hilly Midlands, the fugitive slaves cared little. They were free men, and now concentrated on building their numbers. While below, the British colonists streamlined the patterns of slave trade already firmly entrenched. Towards the early 18th century, Jamaica began to prosper as a major sugar colony. The English king was delighted, and to encourage an even healthier plantation economy, thousands of new slaves were acquired, and new settlements flourished. The island now supported a large black population, bound under a determined white minority. Through ignorance and greed, Jamaica and slavery became one, with the slave trade ruling the fates of all parties involved. Word spread of those slaves who had escaped during the British invasion and who now roamed the interior. They became known as Maroons, from the Spanish cimarron, or unruly ones, and their bold organized raids on white settlements shocked the English and inspired other slaves to escape and join those already free in the mountains. Many early Maroons were born in Africa. They represented many differing tribes with their own cultural backgrounds and languages. There were the Ashantis and Fantis, the Aways and Gaz, the Igbos and Yorubas, and countless others between. From these individuals, a common society took root and arose in the forests to become the Maroons. The British colonial government, recognizing its growing vulnerability, organized a series of military campaigns against the Maroons, yet these almost always met with defeat. Even though the English forces greatly outnumbered the Maroons and were far better equipped, it seemed these Maroon soldiers, led by their disciplined officers, were all but invincible. The Maroons fought a guerrilla war, camouflaged in leaves and lying in ambush, and they used the abang, a horn, whose sound carried over long distances to forewarn others of the approach of enemy forces. The fighting grew, often desperate for both sides, but the Maroons simply could not be defeated, and so in 1739 the English sued for peace. The two major groups of Maroons, one to the west in the Cockpit country, and one in the eastern Blue Mountains, signed formal treaties, entitling the Maroons to full freedom and self-rule, large land grants, exemption from taxation, and peace. Today, the descendants of these people live a peaceful life in the hills of Jamaica. The Maroons haven't forgotten their heroic past. They recite tales of Grandee Nanny. Grandee Nanny, the ancient freedom fighter, the great Maroon heroine who used her awesome supernatural powers to keep the English at bay. They recall the glories of past battles, but above all, they cling to the freedom for which their ancestors fought so bitterly. Today, Jamaica is an independent nation, a dynamic, changing third world country. The Maroons are full Jamaican citizens, but still they remain a people apart, islands within an island. They understand the Jamaican wilderness as no one else can. The mountains, the woodlands, the caves, and the rains, always the rains. Moortown. This is the largest of 4 Maroon towns in Jamaica, and its population is thought to number well above 1,000 residents. It was here that a large number of the Eastern Maroons settled shortly before their historic treaty with the British in 1740. The impression of isolation is deceptive. For generations, the Maroons of Moortown have been in close contact with people from the outside. Today, Moortown is physically indistinguishable from most other rural Jamaican villages. Its neat little zinc-roofed houses, its churches, shops, and rum bars tell little of the ancient Maroon legacy. At first glimpse, there is nothing in Moortown to summon up images of a turbulent past. But beneath the surface, the past lives on.
Moortown, man. It's the capital.
Yeah, man. Moortown is the capital of Earth, you know.
There's no place on earth like the capital. What you say?
It's the Maroon roots.
No truth. Moortown, Earth capital. Strictly.
In Moortown, there is a strong sense of continuity with the Maroon past. For all the changes that have come to Moortown in the last century, there remain many elements connecting today's lifestyle to that of earlier years. Although they are Jamaican citizens, the Moortown Maroons are still governed in the tradition of the treaty by an elected council and chief officer called the Colonel, Colonel C.L.G. Harris.
My duty as colonel, simply stated, is to work for the betterment, the all-round betterment of our community. But as you may well surmise, there are several facets of this rather large sphere of responsibility. Some of these, a few of them are, I must preside at all meetings, committee meetings and township meetings. I must make representations to the government on behalf of my people. I must settle disputes, particularly those involving more than one claimant to any special parcel of land. And I'm expected to see about all cases of non-Maroons who come to Moortown searching for knowledge as far as our history is concerned.
As in the past, land in and around Moortown is communally held by the Maroons as a group, although it is divided up into small farms cultivated and maintained by individuals. The Maroons are still not required to pay taxes on these lands. The farmers of Moortown continue to follow the time-tested traditions of their ancestors. Using the clearing technique known as slash and burn, they grow a few basic subsistence crops, mostly tubers such as yams, dasheen, and cocoa. Farming along the steep slopes is formidable. With cutlass, hoe, and fork, the soil must be worked and the seed sown. So the grandparents planted, and so their grandparents before them. The Maroons have succeeded well as woodsmen. After their treaty, it was only natural that they sell their skills to those outside. For years, Maroons have supplied hand-sawed lumber to other Jamaicans, as they still do today. The forests abound in hard lumber, but the work is demanding and slow, and the pay is low. The Maroons have learned from their ancestors how to use the forest to their advantage. Wild plants such as thatchhead provide a steady source of food in the farthest reaches of the forests. Some of these edible plants are known only to Maroons today. It was such knowledge that saved the early Maroons in times of emergency when crops could not be relied on. Even the Maroon children have learned to gather from the wilds. The Maroon country also abounds in rivers and streams. Today, as in the past, these provide people with a supplementary source of food which can be depended on when times are hard. One of the few remaining Maroon hunters, Leonard White, explains how the Maroons today use the traditional lance, called junga, or a sunodaja, to bring down their prey, the wild hog. The early Maroons were famous for their skill in hunting the boars which ranged the deeper mountains of Jamaica.
We have to aim now. So we have to spin fast and come round all different kind of way and come back to the same movement where we is. And we have to attempt this way. And dog, plenty. And hold them this way.
To help preserve the meat of the wild hog, the Maroons created a special method of preparation called jerking. The meat is seasoned with a mixture of salt and hot pepper and then put aside to cure for several hours. It is later roasted over an open fire. The jerking method has been adopted by other Jamaicans, and today jerk pork has become a favorite delicacy on the island.
Wild hog is a very dangerous thing.
The wild hog is a very dangerous thing.
So we have to have this.
So we need this as our defense.
Defense. The old-time people.
The old-time Maroons used to use it this way,
as guns,
like a gun, to defend themselves.
Against white people. From
During the days of Grandy Nanny, we had to use it in this way,
to have it this way, and the right way,
and also to kill the wild hog.
We use it all different kind of ways.
We used it all different kinds of ways during the old-time days.
So therefore
We call it the Asunu Daja. Raja, the official abang blower for Moortown, prepares his abang for signaling. This instrument, which originated in West Africa, was used as a strategic device to keep the Maroons forewarned of the approach of enemies. Even today, the tonal language of the abang can be used to signal emergency, but more often it is used to call the Maroons to assembly. The language of the abang is a Maroon's secret. The signals for war, carried down from previous generations, have not been forgotten. Ambush. This is what the Maroons call the ancient art of camouflage. Such ingenuity that contributed to the military successes of the early Maroons. They were, after all, the first black guerrilla fighters in the New World. Today, their memory lives on in this practice, reenacted during special ceremonies such as this one, presided over by the Colonel and Assistant Secretary of Moortown. Besides gaining a reputation as fierce fighters, the Maroons also became well known throughout the country as healers, owing to their exceptional knowledge of the bush. Uncle George, a Maroon herbal healer, displays one of his remedies.
And this medicine now.
This medicine is Grandy Nanny's medicine, the medicine of our tribe.
That from Grandy Nanny to Grandy Sekesu.
Grandy Nanny and Grandy Sekesu and all of our ancestors, we form a tribe. And that is why we have learned how to fix up this medicine.
This medicine, you take it and shake it up. And do it so. And throw it in your glass. And drink 1 wine glass 3 times a day. Going to bed at night, you drink 1 wine glass. That's this one. This medicine goes to lots of people.
This medicine has gone out to lots of people, more than 1,000. It is good for the stomach.
This is our weed.
This now is one of our weeds. We take this and juice it and use it to bathe people.
Pain and all sickness.
We use it to treat pain and various kinds of sickness and complaints. This is our weed. It is called Grandy Nanny weed. In some cases, sickness may require more than herbal treatment. This young man is complaining of stomach pains. When it is divined that a sickness such as this has been caused by the influence of supernatural powers, then the spirits of ancestors must be invoked to fight against the evil afflicting the victim. The ritual specialist, known as the dancer man, must undergo years of training to acquire the knowledge necessary to effect a cure. Sacrifice may be offered. As in many African societies, this is a sign of reverence for the ancestors. The close tie between Maroon healers and the spirits of their ancestors is an important part of traditional Maroon culture. It creates a bridge between the present and the past and lends a sense of continuity to Maroon society over the generations. Hopwood, the assistant secretary of the Moortown Maroons, is an accomplished chromanti drummer. In times of crisis, the chromanti drum may be used to invoke Maroon spirits to come and possess the living. In this form, the spirits offer their aid.
This is a Maroon drum. It is made by me. It is called the chromanti drum. It is handed down from our ancestors. It was used during the days when Nanny was fighting against the English. They are very sacred to the Maroons. Use them to send messages. They are used to send messages to the spirit world. In other words, when we are playing for sick, it is nobody, no strangers, nobody except Maroons can attend that ceremony. It is very sacred. I started to play this drum from I was about 4 or 5 years of age. I learned to play it by just watching the players when they are playing at nights or during the days. I mean, I feel pleasure all the while in playing it, because it is of great importance to me.
During an annual celebration in October, the Maroons combine drumming and singing with dance. A woman falls to the first stages of spirit possession, but is quickly cleared of the spirit. Auntie Liz has been the midwife of Moortown for years. She has delivered the majority of the people living in Moortown today.
96. My age is 96.
My age is 96.
And I had most people in Moortown.
I have looked after the babies of almost all the people of Moortown.
And I could have danced the Maroon
I used to dance
dance
the Maroon dance very well.
very much. And when I look after the baby then,
And when I have looked after the
Then don't
babies,
look
the
about
government
me
has not
properly.
looked after me properly.
I think over that very
I think
much.
about this very much.
God help me to get through. I fight the good fight with all I might.
The younger Maroons are still surrounded by tradition. Some Maroon traditions are being passed down to them, such as the gaita, a type of bamboo stilt used for sport during Easter. But change is in the air.
Today,
George Sterling
I
is
am
the secretary
very
of the
happy
Moortown Maroons,
to
and for
be
many years has been an influential member of the
Maroon.
Maroon Council.
some people really believe that Maroons are things of the past. But today, I can assure that I am a true born Maroon, and I am alive. It was miraculous to know how it happens, but it did happen in truth. Nanny scientifically works our way out, and the British has got to subdue by asking for a peace treaty to be signed betwixt the Maroons and the British government. And it was so done with the signing of both British blood and Maroon blood. It was also mixed with rum and was drunk by each parties as a oath that there should be no war again with the Maroons and the British government. And because of that, I am happy to be a Maroon today. as a freedom fighter. And it was so happy that a few years after Maroon got their freedom, then the government find it possible to give freedom to the rest of slaves the first day of August in that year. So today we are happy that Jamaica is a free country, beginning from the Maroons, who fought strenuously for freedom for their race.
So first time it was better to be a Maroons, or the names of a Maroons first time more than now. Because we haven't got any privilege now as a Maroon.
Shepherd, another influential Maroon elder, is respected by young and old alike.
It's really a different thing now from first. When I was a youth, the men used to call around, call a meeting, and send off delegates to the governor. And now it's a different thing. Maroons didn't make any treaty with this Jamaicans. He'd make treaty with the Englishman.
Moortown is no longer a world apart. The Maroons no longer form an isolated enclave. For years, their society has been experiencing encroachment from outside. Today, there is a regular flow of traffic between Moortown and outside points, carrying with it an interchange of people and ideas. The Maroons of today are fully integrated into the cash economy of the island through trade in bananas. To facilitate the marketing of this primary cash crop, the Moortown banana boxing plant was built. It is today owned and run by the Maroons as a group. It is here that the Maroon farmers bring their heavy loads of bananas for sale to outside parties. Eventually, the bananas will be shipped across the ocean to England, but first they must be carried in from the surrounding hills by whatever means possible. Only the most perfect bananas are selected by the buyers, and thus the returns are low for the farmer. He receives cash for those bunches which pass inspection, but the remainder go to waste. It's a frustrating and difficult life for these farmers. Once the bananas have been chosen, they must be washed with great care and chemically treated in special vats. Only then will they be ready to be boxed and shipped on their way. The Maroons must pay in some ways for the benefits brought by the modern trade in bananas. Periodically, their village and the whole surrounding area is sprayed from above with the chemical fungicide, benlate, to protect their bananas. It is a part of progress, some say, but no one knows what repercussions this may have for the environment and the health of future Maroons. With the coming of electricity and of radio and television, the people of Moortown are entering a new era. Programs from outside penetrate the community. Nearly every household has a radio. And so the motions of change accelerate. As one generation gives way to the next, there is a shift in attitude, away from Maroon traditions of the past and toward a new urban consciousness. Most of the younger people today pay little attention to the older Maroon traditions. They have developed their own forms of entertainment and social expression. Often, the younger Maroons organize an event called the Youth Concert, consisting of a number of short plays or skits which they develop and act out. These plays reflect their changing attitudes and tastes. Urban popular music and dance styles such as reggae and ska, imitated by voice here, have replaced the traditional Maroon dances among the younger generation.
Christian ball, buy some pita, buy some pan. Oh, Jane, get me the hyla, mama latitudes.
In this skit, some young Maroons are satirizing the traditional sorcerer known throughout Jamaica as the Science Man or Obia Man. A young man is visiting one such science man named Christian Ball and asking him for help in keeping his wife from being unfaithful.
Jane, bring me the heating flame, that my heat is private, that is private, maybe lanky.
Christian Ball agrees to help him, using the power of his spirits, but humiliates the patient in the process and then demands a fee of $250,000.
Buy some Paul. I won't pack, I could never get no more man. Jane, have this. I need $250,000 and everything will be alright. Like how I want it, but not like how you want it.
Urban gambling games have become popular and commonplace in Moortown. One such game is Ludi, introduced from the city streets below. Money turns over as fast as the dice.
Hey, what thing where they after?
Yes. So what you call that? Sure.
I don't want to go up on the road, go bus, no gun.
Another outside influence in Moortown comes from the religious movement known as Rastafarianism. It is a complex movement whose members believe in the divinity of Haile Selassie, the former emperor of Ethiopia. It is a Back to Africa movement, a movement of black pride, which preaches peace and love, but at the same time predicts a violent apocalypse in which the tables of power shall turn. The Rastafarian movement has recently grown in numbers and become a major social force in modern Jamaica. Although Rastafarianism is at odds with Maroon tradition in several ways, it has strongly influenced younger Maroons, some of whom have fully converted to the Rastafarian faith. Touch, Llewellyn, and Sample are three such young Maroons who have become Rastas.
Yeah, I see it say, I come from the four parents.
As I see it, my foreparents were Maroons, and I come from the tradition of the Maroons. But I am a Rastafari now. I follow a different tradition now. I follow natural ways. I don't eat any meat.
So right now, as far as I can see it.
So right now, as I see it, I know I am doing the right thing.
So right now, the Maroon, them kill and I no kill, you know?
Because the Maroons kill, but I don't kill. I just live right. So as I see it, I come from the Maroon tribe, but I am a Rastafari now.
True, my brother.
Naya, a leading younger Maroon, expresses his feelings about Maroon tradition.
People used to say, well, that we are not Maroon, and I personally used to consider that maybe by the end of 1978 or until 1970 then, there'll be no such thing as Maroon in existence today as far as Moortown is concerned. Because what that means is that the older people and the youth couldn't get along properly, right? There was a segregation between old and young. Therefore, the youth didn't really see fit to take up the culture of their foreparent. But today we have seen changes wherein there is better communication between youths and old. And old youth can understand the old people, and the old people can understand the youth. Because if we should look at the celebration that went on sometime back in last month, the 10th of October, then we see that the major part of the workforce was shared by the youths and not the older people as customary. In that, if this type of celebration had occurred about 5 years ago, then you would have little or no youth participating in such a celebration, which is more beneficial to the youth than to the older people. In that, the youth will be the men and women of tomorrow, and it's just right for them to really take up the role and the responsibility that is laid upon them by the older people. Even though their fault for not taking up, like I've said earlier on, was because of the action of the older people. But as we can see, this have changed a lot, and I hope that in the future when I'm asked a question like this, I'll be more proud than what I am today to say, well, I'm glad to be a Maroon. It means a lot to me to be a Maroon today.
Eileen, another young Maroon, reveals her attitude about her Maroon heritage.
And I'm very proud of being a Maroon because for our era, Nanny, she was the leader for the Maroon, and maybe if it was not she today, there would never be any Maroon. Because she has defeated the English soldiers and she has bring us victory. So I'm very proud of today, of being a Maroon.
The Maroons have lasted 3 centuries. They've maintained a distinct identity and a living Maroon tradition. And now the Maroon heritage threatens to fade into the past, to vanish from the landscape of the living. But perhaps the Maroon story will survive, as a legend frozen in the collective memory of the countryside. With one foot in the past, the other has taken a large step towards the pace, excitement, and sound of the city. The younger Maroons are content to put aside the past and follow the pleasures of the present towards the future.
We all gonna sing the same song. We all gonna sing the same song. Oh, whether you're a bubble, or whether you're an orthodox, or whether you're a Reenacted dread, or whether you're a 12th tribe of Israel, we all gonna sing the same song.
As the moon sets and the sun rises, Moortown lies at the crossroads of time and transition. The isolation that once guaranteed the Maroon survival has fallen away to reveal new questions and priorities. Moortown can no longer afford to stand alone. The young awaken to find themselves holding the past and searching the future. But for all Maroons, there is an honesty to their epic that can never die. It is the timeless cry for human dignity and liberation, from the first freedom fighters who stood their ground to those who now dwell in the capital of earth.
Padali malo kade man sa jamala jamano la nyomi berandi ka pole man sa dem masom ko tama ka ko tani mara ko tini yang ka bijin so ko wa ga so ko ka yang ko na so mo de na mo kanin oye suwa bari jannama ulama kele ba sane ala suwa bari jannama ulama la min jata ulama